Right. This is going to be a short presentation overview about the topic of addiction, that is general addiction. And I would appreciate it if we could have some feedback from you later on when you go home about the presentation. The reason is simply that I want to see how we can improve on future presentations. It's the very first time that I'm going to present that particular topic. And so if you are happy and willing to fill in a short questionnaire, very short 8 questions questionnaire, which will take you perhaps less than 5 minutes. Then if you want to do that, I will pass this around. You put your name and your email address. It's going to be done by online. So I will send you the link, and then you can open it, and then just check those questions. And then I'll get the result and find out how we did and so forth. Richard, if you need a pen, there's a pen here. All right. I need the clicker to change the slides. Thank you. Yeah. And depending on how we're doing for time, we'll find out later on. We may have, you may want for us to do a way of applying some treatment for addiction, which is also known as motivational interviewing. But we'll see how that goes. Meanwhile, we're going to be doing an overview, and then we'll talk about the etiology and the diagnosis, then go into the treatment. Okay. We all are well aware that addiction is a plague which is worldwide and affects individuals and affects society. It affects the economies of the countries around the world. Lots of studies have been done, especially in the Western world. In Australia, I've got lots of statistics in front of me here. I'm not going to burden you with those statistics. And then we have studies done in the States and also in the UK. For instance, let me give you one example of that. 2007, United Kingdom focal point report covering illicit drug use of 16 to 59-year-olds from England and Wales found that 35.4% had used drugs in their lifetime. And so when we talk about addiction, we talk about 2 things here. We're talking about substance abuse, and then we're talking about non-substance abuse. And of course, we all know what a substance is. We're talking about alcohol, about cigarettes and marijuana, amphetamines, cocaine, and on and on, and opiates. And non-substance related forms of addictions also have become very problematic. And these include gambling and workaholism, something that sometimes we are proud of, even within our church. But it is an addiction. It needs to be addressed sooner or later, preferably sooner rather than later. And there's also in the area of exercise as well, believe it or not. And pornographic viewing, and we talked about that in the past, and other sexual behaviors, and so on and so. These are known as behavioral addictions or non-substance compulsions. So how do we, let me see, come on. It's not going.
Press buttons. I'm trying to, please press the button.
Please don't push the buttons, please.
Thank you.
Good?
Press now? Okay, good. So we'll have the overview. We talk about the prevalence. We've already said that. Now I'm going to define addiction Okay, there are several definitions, and this is one of those. It's a state in which an organism engages in a compulsive behavior. Behavior is reinforcing, rewarding, or pleasurable. Yeah, these are two keywords there, rewarding and pleasurable. And then there's a loss of control and limiting intake. You know, it's pleasurable and rewarding to eat, but then when it becomes compulsive and then becomes addictive, that's another story. So it sort of refers to this persistent, repetitive, and often irresistible self-destructive activity that at its beginning is perceived as rewarding. But then as time goes on, it becomes a learned behavior and becomes difficult to get rid of despite the negative consequences on the individual and the environment. So the term addiction is often used to refer to physiological dependence on the substance, but all addictions are said to be disorders that result in uncontrolled, repetitive behaviors, and in most cases, addicts may not recognize the harmful effects of their behaviors until the behaviors become progressively disruptive to their lives. So there are all types of addictions. So this is what we were saying about the characteristics of addiction. Compulsive use, that is, there's tolerance, there's craving, withdrawal, symptoms and habit, and then loss of control, using more and more or longer on the substance intended. Types of behavior addictions. You have such things as internet and games in the area of finances, and then the shopping, talk about shopaholics, yeah, workaholic, and then love as well.
Addicted to love.
Sorry?
Can you be addicted to love?
Below internet and games. Is that debit?
Is it debit?
Games, internet and games, yes.
I mean debit.
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 Debt.
Oh, is that debt? Debt or debit?
Should be debt.
Debt.
Well, they are connected, but yeah, I see what you mean. That was well, when you are in credit, you are not addicted. You are in control. When you're in credit, when you're in debit, out of control.
So how are you addicted to love?
Oh, okay. All right. Can somebody give an example of that?
I don't know. I guess for me,
You're addicted to love.
no.
Okay, go ahead.
For me, I would say someone who's infatuated with that dating sense. Just like you just want that I don't know.
That buzz
Have
all
you
the
ever been in
time.
a relationship before, Dale? Uncle Dale. So when you're dating somebody, no, listen.
Yeah, I'm listening. Go,
listen.
go, yeah.
When you're dating someone
Right.
and you get that puppy love stage, where everything is perfect and you really starting to feel this girl, she's perfect, and then she does something wrong and you drop her, then you date somebody else. Just that consistency of always being in that happily stage. For me, that's what it is.
Yeah. No, you're onto something there. As a matter of fact, it's very much connected also, believe it or not, to pornography and sexual issues as well. And there's a link, with those things as well. And therefore, people basically, they lose their rational, their objectivity, and their sense of wholeness is kind of undermined. So you can be, as Christians, we say, we need to love everybody and all the rest of it. That's a good thing, yes, of course. But when it comes to going into a place where you lose control over who you are and that is affecting you and your relationships with others, you think you are in love, but in fact, you're not. Something else is happening there, which is not really that good for you.
So that's the same thing as promiscuity.
Well, I think promiscuity, we're probably be looking at sex there, in that particular area, That is, there's people who are serial adulterers, you know. And so they go from one relationship to the next to the next. There's an element of addiction in that thing, isn't there? Okay. Yeah, that's good. You just feedback and ask questions, and let's contribute to the whole discussion here. That's the whole point of it. And then, of course, we know about gambling and food and eating. We know about that as well. And then codependency. Is that, you know, see what that is, codependency? No? You heard of that expression? So especially in terms of relationships. Let's say somebody in the family, the father is an alcoholic, yeah? And then the wife, instead of helping the husband to overcome by using certain strategies and skills, what she does, she looks for excuses for what's happening. And she may even herself start getting into this cycle of alcoholism as well. And so they kind of feed off each other sort of situation. And also known as relationship addiction also. That's another way of looking at it. Okay, then you have sugar addiction. Sugar addiction. That's the cycle, you know. You eat sugar, you like it, you crave it. It has addictive properties inbuilt, that sugar thing, yeah? And so what happens is that your blood sugar levels spike, right? Dopamine is released in the brain. You know what dopamine is? You know, that's the feel-good chemical that goes on to your system, released in the brain. That's exactly what happens when you're addicted. And the brain is equal to addiction, and the mass insulin is secreted to drop blood sugar levels. And then the third thing is that blood sugar levels fall rapidly, and high insulin levels cause immediate fat storage, and then body craves the lost sugar high. And then the fourth aspect of that, the sugar and cravings. Low blood sugar levels cause increased appetite and cravings, and thus the cycle is repeated. So watch out for sweet teeth or sweet tooth. It might not be, you know, you might get in a place where you don't really want to be. Okay, then there is, causes of addiction. Causes of addiction. Right. Addiction has now been recognized as a medical disease, but no specific cause has been found. And instead, addiction is caused by a combination of genetics, environment, and stress. That is according to those people, like Keeper and Whitney. The three main neurotransmitters involved in addiction are serotonin, noradrenaline, and dopamine. They exist in a balance. We are all born with a genetic tendency towards a slight imbalance between these three neurotransmitters. However, the more off balance the relationship between those neurotransmitters are, the greater risk that person carries for addiction. What the person is most likely to be addicted to is dependent on what neurotransmitter is the most out of balance. And stress is a key trigger for most addictions. Stress throws off the brain's homeostasis, that is the natural balance, and significantly increases the risks that the person will turn to addictive and self-medicating behavior. So that's one model of what's going on. Obviously, there are others who have different ways of looking at it, and we may also have our own way of looking at things, but at least this is a point whereby we can start looking at what's going on, what causes addiction. Yeah? So if you have some, like I say, comments or any other light you want to throw on the topic or questions to ask, just feel free to stop me anytime and we'll entertain that.
It sounds like that definition really is it's like you're already born with an addiction or some traces of an addiction, and you're just waiting for something to trigger.
Yes.
I mean, sin, you're born into it. And so because of that, anything can happen.
Yeah, no, but this is from a biological point of view.
Okay, I'm sorry to say, but sin is not. We inherited that.
Yeah, sin is not biological.
How you figure that? How is it not? Please. Tell me how is it not? Did we not inherit that from
Because
Adam and Eve?
biological factors is factors that you can't necessarily change, like my skin color.
I cannot change the fact that I was born this day. I can't. However, there is a cure for it.
I think it's different, but what I'm saying is this sounds like you are already have some sort of tendencies towards addiction, addictive behavior.
Yeah.
And all you just basically want is some sort of a treat. That's what
Okay. Right. We are born in sin. Addiction is sin. We are born with tendencies to sin, whether it is addiction or whatever it is. All right? So I think we can agree on that. And then it takes a few triggers for us to actually go there. But on the other hand, it also takes certain disciplines and so on and so forth for us to not go there, or if you are there, to come out of there as well, some kind of treatment strategy. Yeah? So I think we are more or less on the same page here, right? Oh, yeah. It's not a predeterministic. It's not like, okay, you are like that and therefore there's nothing you can do about it. Is there? Because there's still a lot that can be done, that is being done, for people to actually, even if they are addicted, to actually overcome the addiction, which means that irrespective of where you came from, what your point of entry was in this world in terms of your genes, you can still live a good life and to overcome. That is from a purely medical and emotional and mental health point of view, let alone a spiritual point of view, which is even more powerful than all those things combined, perhaps. Yeah, so, okay, we'll talk more about this kind of thing a bit later, towards the end, about the treatment and so forth. All right, we already talked about characteristics of, let me go back there, characteristics of addiction. Let me say a few more words about that. So apparently, we talk about the 3 C's, which is the C's of compulsive use, then the loss of control, and the continued use. So the compulsive use has 3 elements to it. There is a reinforcement, there's a craving, and there's a habit. So the reinforcement refers to a process in which the behavior to use is strengthened based on previous experience. And such experience as relief from pain or stress, increased pleasure, and or becoming more sociable may strengthen the desire to use the substance. So being rewarded with pleasure or relief from stress and pain therefore encourages substance use. So when one continues to use a substance, something happens. It's known as tolerance. Tolerance develops. What is tolerance? Tolerance refers to the need for an increased amount of substance or behavior, or / behavior, to achieve previously similar desired effect. I remember many years ago, I was in Egypt, and a brother came to me and discussing this topic of people being, addicted to sexual matters and pornography and so on and so forth. And he said to me, I need somebody who's, I suppose he probably has finished his high school, I don't know, but he was not an academic or a highly educated person by any means. He was a maintenance man for the field there, very humble man, spoke very, very simple language. But he discovered something which is exactly true what is being said here. And he said that when somebody starts using a little of that, they're not satisfied. They want to have more of it. And they are never satisfied with more. They want keep on having more. And they never are satisfied. They still want more and more because what they had in the first place was not enough. All of a sudden, they find that it's not enough. They need more in order to have the same amount of pleasure. In order to, and that's what we call, in a way, I don't know, he didn't even use the word tolerance, but this is what it's all about. And so it develops when normal brain functions adapt to compensate for the disruption caused by the substance in both the behavior and the bodily functions. So chronic exposure to the substance produces neuronal adaptation that results not in intolerance, but in the requirement of the presence of the substance for normal function. So as tolerance increases, absence of the substance may lead to craving. That's where we come to next. The craving is this physiological need for the substance triggered by relevant brain activity. The body and the brain send signals during the absence of the substance, triggering withdrawal symptoms. By the way, let me repeat again that, make it even perhaps a little clearer. When we say substance, we don't really necessarily only mean substance such as drug, alcohol, and so on and so forth, but also the effects of the use of pornography or such other things as well. And same thing happens, in the behavioral side of things. So habit, and then after the craving comes the withdrawal, rather. And this refers to the maladaptive behavior change with physiological and cognitive effects that occur as a result of abrupt termination or substantial reduction of the substance in the body. That's the withdrawal symptoms. That's where most people don't like to go when they're addicted, because it's very painful. Then the habit then refers to an automatic and compulsive pattern of the behavior that demonstrates poor self-control and tends to continue despite negative feedback. And this results from the deeply ingrained patterns in the memory of the nervous system. The brain's normal circuits include the brain reward system that induces pleasurable feelings when stimulated. And so to regain these rewarding feelings, the circuit in the brain encourages a repeat of the behaviors that stimulate pleasurable feelings, which in turn encourages continued use of the desired substance. So first you have the compulsive use, and then you have the loss of control. That is the next stage. In its broader sense, it encompasses both the relative inability of an addict to terminate consumption once initiated and the inability to refrain from substance use following a period of abstinence. And this has been attributed to impairments in the area of the brain that is responsible for executive functions, including behavioral autonomy and self-control. So impairments to the frontal lobe, by the way, following long-term chronic substance use may result in compulsive behavior. So typically, addicts cannot predict or determine how much of the drug they intend to use and for how long they will use it. Loss of control is manifested by the following. First of all, there is using more of the substance than intended. So once a person with an addiction gets rolling, it can be very hard to stop. And so when addicted, the person can become oblivious to the passage of time or obligations they may have. For example, your roommate says he's just going to have one or two beers over at a friend's place. I'm talking in a secular setting, obviously. So you drop by about an hour later and find that he's finished a six-pack and is heading into a new one. A woman tells her husband she's going to have a drink after supper. 2 hours later, her husband has noticed her filling at least 4 times. So using the substance longer than the intended time. So it is often difficult for addicted individuals to stop use once they have started. For example, a husband tells his wife he's just going to watch the game and drink a few beers at a friend's place, house. Then he'll come home and they'll go out for dinner. However, he doesn't come home in time for dinner, and his wife can't reach him. Why? Because he and his friends had gotten drunk during the game and went down to the public pub for a few hours. Now, being able to keep track of how much of the substance they have used becomes an impossibility. Okay, so addicts almost always underestimate the amount they have used. For example, if you ask an alcoholic how much they have consumed, you will invariably get some strange answers. Some will swear they only had 4 or 5, even when their blood alcohol content shows much higher concentrations than what would be accountable if having 4 or 5. Or they may simply say, well, I don't know, which is probably the most accurate answer anyway. Then there's the continued use. An addicted individual will usually experience a compulsive desire to use a substance despite their efforts to cut down or stop. Often, addicts may not be aware of the negative consequences associated with the substance abuse. And if they are aware, they may opt to focus on the perceived positive reinforcements that they associate with substance use, such as stress relief. So, cycle of, well, first of all, let's look at this definition of sexual addiction, for instance. That's another form of addiction. We talked about that in the past, very briefly, which is an illness. This definition, that's how they consider it to be an illness. It's a pathological relationship with a mood-altering experience. Yeah? Sexual addiction is not about sex. It is about an individual's obsessive-compulsive relationship with sex. An obsessional illness which transforms sex into an individual's primary relationship or need, where a sex addict will rely on sexual acting out as a source of nurturing, comfort from pain, or relief from stress. Unfortunately, this is to the huge detriment of family, friends, work, and personal values, which are relentlessly sacrificed in pursuit of compulsive sexual acting out. So sex addicts, as a matter of fact, have lost control over their ability to say no. They have lost the ability to choose. Their sexual behavior is part of a cycle of thinking, feeling, and acting which they cannot control. Now, if you... Sorry?
Paul was asking the question.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Does this affect prostitutes only or anybody?
Technically, that's not what prostitutes do. It has something to do with prostitution.
Because it becomes an addiction.
No.
It's like a job.
Yes, it's a job, but some of them are forced into it, like human trafficking.
Because they're addicted to other things, maybe drugs or other things, so they're feeding the habit or
And it's the
sometimes
fastest way they can make money.
Okay?
But it has nothing to do with
Why
it.
I'm asking, because this 13-year-old, in fact, she started when she was 9. And she just wanted to carry on with sex, and she asked the man, she stopped the man and asked him, can you make love to me? But she say, I want sex. Until she was 13, 14, she died at the age of 18 with AIDS, because then she ended up having AIDS.
Sure.
But she would go crazy for this.
Mm-hmm.
She said she couldn't stop it, she had to have it. So I'm asking,
But that could be because of other reasons.
Yeah.
I think this is something different, where this is the relationship where sex is used to control other things, like pain and stress. So it's not really the sex itself, it's just the relationship you have with it. You're using it for to control other things.
because no one knows why this child did that. Because her mom and dad weren't together.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking at the nurturing, the comforting, the pain, the relief why she did it.
Yeah, okay. Very often you will find that when you look at those cases, analyze them, you find that.
She started at a young age.
Right.
Could have caused all that to do
Yeah.
it.
Well, you did say that her parents split, right? And so there was no real love, nurture, or anything of that nature. She was. It looks like she was missing something out of her life, and then she wanted to replace that by being loved. In fact, equating having sex with being loved, which you can't do because at the end of the day, if she is feeling some pleasure out of this, for instance, she would want to get more of that in order to compensate for all the pain that she's been experiencing, throughout her short life. And that's one way of things going bad for young people even.
She was a beautiful girl.
Yes.
None of it still makes sense because if sex is what she wanted, she could have stayed with one partner and had whatever. But the fact that she was doing it with multiple partners, that's even worse. So maybe she was missing her father, like you said, and I don't know for whatever reason
Yeah.
connect.
And you will find also that such girls, their self-esteem is so down there in the gutter that men will not stay with her anyway. They will abuse and then drop her and then throw her out because they don't feel comfortable with her anyway. And so she still needs to compensate for what she's lacking in her life so that she goes for the next one and the next one. And they keep dropping her, and using her and abusing her, and then that's it. She's gone.
Because why I used the word prostitute, because the children end up calling her that.
Well, that's a whole another area, isn't it? Even this whole topic of prostitution, it's another big area, isn't it? Of course, we can't say that she was a prostitute because at her young, tender age like that, there was something else going on of a major mental and emotional and psychological significance, So if you were to look at really the whole background and everything and sit down with her and talk and find out what's going on, you may be able to discover a few things there.
I did approach her mom first.
Yes.
My mom told me to mind my own business.
Yeah.
I said, it's a child. She's still a child.
Yeah, sure.
I see her doing behind my yard. I said, it's not fair.
Yeah, that's right, yes.
She's still a little child and big men are doing this to her. It's not right.
Yeah.
As a mother, come and sort your child out. She said, mind your own business, Pop.
Mm-hmm.
None of your business. My child's doing whatever, it's not your business.
Well, if it's in England, of course, if you, as an adult, you see something that's happening, you will have to go to social services, because if you don't, you may be in trouble yourself because you didn't report what was happening to that minor child. Yeah, it's a criminal thing, isn't it? Anyway, yeah, that's... oh, by the way, before I forget, Monday, 5 o'clock, Radio 4, or you can have it on the podcast afterwards. There is a program there, half an hour or so, there will be a program on pornography and how some young people are starting to see the light in this. And so that's, you may want to listen to that, Radio 4, Monday, PM, 5 o'clock, yeah? Eddie Mayer. Whenever I'm driving at that time, I always sit on Eddie Mayer. I think it's Eddie Mayer, isn't it? PM, 5 o'clock?
PM is at 5 o'clock.
Yeah. Monday, BBC 4, Eddie Mayer, isn't it? His name, the presenter is Eddie Mayer? No? Anyway, doesn't matter. Whoever.
Eddie Mayer does
Yeah.
he does do it for 5 o'clock. But there is also the other church. Two other people do it.
Yeah. You want to say something, Limbani? No?
No, I thought you were on the panel.
Thank you. Yeah, well. Too bad. It's so sad. No, I present here, it's a much more illustrious congregation. Okay, so, right, let's see what's next there. Cycle of addiction. This is one way of looking at it. I keep saying one way because there's so many ways of looking at that particular topic. You start with internal frustration. You're frustrated, so what do? You start fantasizing, and then you start obsessing about your fantasy, and then you say, okay, the next step is the substance abuse, which means leads you to loss of control, and then there's a guilt over use, and there's a cessation of use for a while at least, then there's a passage of time, and then there's another internal frustration, and the cycle goes on. That's the cycle of addiction. Right. Let's talk about the etiology. You know what I'm talking about when I say etiology? All these medical people in the audience here. So which is basically, we're talking about the cause or set of causes or manner of causation of a disease or condition. Yeah, that's the word for it. So there are psychological, biological, and social factors for starters. So let's just look at those three main ones. Now, almost all substance use affects what is known as the reward mechanism in the brain. The main chemical messenger involved in the brain's reward mechanism begins with a D, dopamine, that's right. So each time the person uses a substance, they will tend to feel good, which makes them want to use the substance again. And over time, changes in the brain occur. That is, a less dopamine is produced, which lessens the pleasurable effects of the substance, and therefore, larger amounts are needed to get the same effect. Now, the early stages of addiction are usually actually associated with both positive and negative reinforcements. Reinforcement refers to process in which the substance use behavior is strengthened due to previous consequences experienced by the user as a result of the substance use behavior. So positive reinforcement refers to a situation where there is a rewarding experience obtained from the using behavior. For example, feeling calm and relaxed after smoking cannabis or feeling sociable after drinking alcohol. So the rewarding experience increases the probability of the using behavior occurring again in order for the user to have the rewarding experience again. For example, if a person feels relaxed after drinking alcohol, they are more likely to use alcohol to obtain that same relaxed feeling again. Then you have the negative reinforcement. That refers to a situation where there is a negative experience avoided as a result of the using behavior. For example, a person may be able to avoid the feelings of anxiety by smoking cannabis or avoid social anxiety by drinking alcohol. So the successful avoidance of the negative experience through the using behavior increases the likelihood of the behavior occurring again in order to avoid the same negative experience. Now, it is common for individuals to get caught up in the addictive use and abuse of substance in order to eliminate negative emotions and stress, depression, anxiety, and irritability. After repeated use, an individual will come to realize that they don't experience these emotions when they use the desired substance. So this operates as a motivator for continued use, not only to avoid such negative reinforcers, but also to manage withdrawal symptoms that they may have experienced following cessation of the substance at various times. So in this sense, afflicted or addicted individuals do not only use substance to avoid negative emotions and chemically induce more positive side effects, the motivation for continued use is also fueled by the physiological and psychological need to manage withdrawal symptoms that develop with their dependency. So that's a very vicious cycle, isn't it? Then you have the biological factors. There is a compelling research to suggest that the development of addiction, particularly with alcohol and drugs, is influenced by genetic factors. All right, so that's one side of the coin. And further research, however, is needed to ascertain the specific genes involved in substance dependency. This hasn't been ascertained yet, but there's still this idea that out there. And finally, there's the social factors. So, the role of society, peers and family systems, they have all been found to be associated with the adoption and maintenance of addiction. For example, conformity to some social norms have been said to contribute to the onset of addiction. Glamorizing of substance use, particularly drugs by celebrities, has also been implicated in development of addiction among young adults. And you have family influences as well. And advocates of family systems hold problematic parental modeling of adult role as a key factor in this area. Now, let's talk about diagnosis.
Just one. Isn't that a serious issue where this society that we live in is dictated by the way our celebrities behave? They glamorize something, it becomes a social norm, and that is for everything. From pornography right down. I find that the celebrities, as long as they are involved in everything, because they still get promoted, they still get big money for doing it.
Right, yeah.
And so forth. But at the same time, the problem that is created is blamed by individuals. They don't blame society for the drugs industry, the alcohol. Pornography is £45 million industry in England, and it's 30 billion in America. But they wouldn't shut them down. They say, okay, let's have them.
Right.
Because they say it's a necessary evil. That's what they call it. But celebrities and all other people are involved in these things. So it gets glamorized. And so it's really a vicious cycle.
Absolutely, yes.
But to get control of it, they don't tackle the real cause, the root cause of it. They wouldn't, because that means that you'll have to deal with the celebrities that have a lot of power, influence, and money. So it's hard to touch them.
That's right,
So you let it go through until the person, the individuals who might have social problems, and then you deal with them by putting them in prison or whatever. You deal with them, not the celebrities. So it's really a vicious cycle.
Oh, yes.
Which is sad.
Yeah, that's right. We don't live in a bubble, unfortunately.
Because on one hand, it's saying it's bad, but you are actively encouraging it. Our buses these days seems to be the advertising of, nudity is nothing these days, because they're all on buses, half naked and stuff like that. And that never used to be.
Sure.
But now, because of advertisers, because the buses go everywhere, that's where they put in some of these posters for the young people to view.
That's true. Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. Diagnosis. There's a difference between substance use and substance abuse. Yes. Substance use, as the name implies, refers to the use of substance in low to moderate amounts and will not interfere with your social, occupational, or educational functioning. Not that we are advocating that by any means or stretch of the imagination. We don't, but that's the way the world looks at it. All right? I needed to emphasize that. Then you have substance abuse. On the other hand, refers to the regular use, and it is defined in terms of how significantly the substance interferes with the user's responsibilities and how much it disrupts their life. And so for an individual to be diagnosed with substance dependence or addiction, there has to be an indication that an individual continues to use that substance despite the problems experienced. And then you have this word dependence, which refers to learned habits, established that once established, become difficult to extinguish despite the negative consequences associated with it. And this is because addiction involves reinforcers that are both psychological and physiological in nature, and together they create a powerful reward system that clouds awareness of problematic consequences related to the behavior, making it difficult to change. There are two types of substance-related disorders. These are substance use disorders, and then there's substance-induced disorders. And addiction is hard to diagnose because most individuals are unlikely to voluntarily mention that they use any substance, and often they will deny the existence of any problem in their using behavior due to limited insight into their situation. So this is a common characteristic of addiction, and it is referred to by another word, begins with D, and it's called denial. Then substance abuse, again, refers to a pattern of repeated harmful use of substance or substances despite knowledge of adverse consequences. And the term substance refers to the drug or abuse and includes prescription medication as well. There is a book called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and we were talking about that over lunch, also known as the DSM-4TR, which is an American manual which psychiatrists use and doctors as well. Suggests that a person can only be diagnosed with substance abuse if he or she does not fit the criteria for dependence. Individuals may not be dependent on the desired substance, but regular use may create dangerous situations. So then there's substance abuse, and this is described again. I got the whole description there. You know, in other words, you got what is known as a diagnostic criteria for substance abuse. There are 4 criteria that I have here in front of me. I'm not going to read them to you. It's a bit long and boring. And then you have substance dependence. Again, that is for an individual to be diagnosed with substance dependence or addiction. There has to be an indication that the individual continues to use the substance despite the problems experienced. And again, I have the table here for diagnostic criteria for substance dependence in front of me. If you're interested later on, you can have a look at it. Then you have substance intoxication dependence, disorder rather. That is, the essential feature of the disorder is the development of a reversible substance-specific syndrome due to recent exposure to the substance. And this involves irreversible maladaptive physiological and psychological changes such as disturbed perception, thinking and attention, psychomotor behavior, and interpersonal behavior. And the level of intoxication varies among individuals, and it depends on the substance used, the dose, the level of sort of tolerance for the user, and the environment in which the substance is taken. And again, I've got the criteria here in front of me for substance intoxication, and the same for withdrawal as well. I've got this here. So now we've done all this. Now we come to the treatment side of things, right? I'm going to take a quick overview, bird's eye view of that aspect. It's challenging, as you can understand, I appreciate, because they have got so many dimensions, and they can deal with so many areas of an individual's lives. And so a treatment that will be effective will have to incorporate many components, and each one will be directed to a particular aspect of the conditions and its consequences. So ultimately, treatments aspire to help the individual stop using substance in an abusive or addictive way, which would usually entail maintenance of a drug-free lifestyle and achieving a productive level of functioning in the family. Because addiction is a disease, and that's how they consider it to be a disease, people cannot simply stop using drugs for a few days and be cured. Most patients require long-term or repeated episodes of care to achieve the ultimate goal of sustained abstinence and recovery of their lives. Now, you notice something here. They're talking about, reducing it in such a way that they can then manage their lives. They're not talking about total abstinence as we would if we were to deal with certain situations ourselves. And of course, there is a danger when you just reduce it, because the likelihood of relapse are very, very real and quite powerful as well. You may have somebody who, let's say, was an atheist, became a Christian, used to be an alcoholic, went through the rehab and got out of it, and he was okay, and then goes to church on a Sunday, takes the communion service, takes the wine. Then it goes back to become an alcoholic because, they had this experience of feeling good while drinking that wine. Fortunately, in our church, we don't give any opportunity to anyone to go back to their pre-conversion, pre-baptismal life of addictions. Now comes the last part, which is, for me, all these things are very interesting, very important. You need to know about those things. As a counselor, you need to have all this kind of background. And as Christians as a whole, I think it's good for us to be knowledgeable about such things. You never know when you will be meeting those kind of situations whereby you can perhaps understand, if not help somebody with their situation. Now, what interests me the most, having done all the medical and so forth side of things, is the emotional side of things, and the cognitive side of things. That's where I'm really most into. And there's something that is called motivational interviewing, to help somebody to move on with their lives and get unstuck from their addictions and so forth. So motivational interviewing is also it's a style of person-centered counseling, which has been developed to facilitate change in health-related behaviors. The approach aims to help people explore and resolve their ambivalence about behavior change. And the approach strives to increase the client's own motivation so that change occurs from the client rather than the therapist imposing the change, and combines warmth and empathy from the therapist toward the client with focused, reflective listening and the development of discrepancy between where the person is and where they would like to be. And the core principle is that the person's motivation to change is enhanced if there is a gentle process of negotiation in which the client, not the counselor, explores the benefits and costs involved in change. And so this way of working, this theory, if you may call it this way, assumes that people can change their behavior when they can clearly see a discrepancy between their behavior and their broader personal goals. So another strong principle of this approach is that conflict is unhelpful and that a collaborative relationship is essential between the counselor and the client in order to tackle the problem together. So, motivational enhancements helps change patterns of behavior that have become habitual. It works in small doses to produce large effect by reducing behaviors in the person that interferes with therapy. So there are four central principles of motivational enhancement shown as the following. The first thing is to express empathy by using reflective listening to convey understanding of the person's point of view and underlying drives. By empathy, there are lots of things that come under this umbrella, the word, such as, unconditional acceptance of the person, no matter who they are, what they've done, and so forth, and conditional acceptance and love for the person. and really knowing how to listen to the person and showing genuine warmth towards the person, so on and so forth. And then you have to develop the discrepancy between the person's most deeply held values and their current behavior. And that is, behaviors conflict with the wish to be good or different in the way they currently function. Then you have also to roll with the resistance by responding with empathy and understanding rather than confrontation when they try to sort of be awkward or something. And then support self-efficacy by building the person's belief that change is possible. So that's motivational interviewing. You need to be able to understand the person's frame of reference, their worldview, their values, their culture, and their family systems, and be able to get into their world, so to speak, so that they know that you are truly, genuinely, authentically interested in them as a person, and you're not condemning them, pointing the finger at them or anything of that nature, but rather you are there to help them move from point A to point B, being stuck to being unstuck. So that's the thing what we are trying to do. And then you have to filter the person's thoughts so that statement encouraging change are amplified and statements that reflect the status quo are dampened down. We'll talk about that a bit more later. And then elicit from the person's statements that encourage change, such as expressions of problem recognition, intention to change, and recognition of ability to change. Then you match the processes used in treatment to the stage of change. You ensure treatment does not jump ahead of the person. You express acceptance. You affirm the person's freedom of choice and self-direction. So there are some skills that you need to use to do that. And in other words, the first thing is that you're not there to fix the person by giving some instructions, do this, don't do that. That's not what you are there for. Rather, you express your warmth and your respect, and then you help them through skills and motivate them towards what they want to do. If they don't want to do it, then obviously one wonders why should they have come there in the first place to see you. And reminds me of this lady who went to the doctor, and so the doctor said, well, I want to know from you, is there insanity in your family? And she thought for a moment and said, oh, yes, as a matter of fact, there is. Oh, okay, can you tell me more about it? Yes, it's about my husband. He thinks he's the boss. Anyway. Okay, in motivational interviewing, any argument for change comes from the client, not the counselor. The natural expected outcome of a counselor making an argument for change is that an ambivalent client will argue against it. So don't try even to do that, because it's not going to work. Client will become more committed to what they hear themselves saying. So if the counselor causes a client to argue against the need for change, they are being encouraged not to make changes. For example, when asking on a scale of 0 to 10, how important is it for you to change your drug use behavior? When 0 is not considered important at all, and 10 is extremely important, and the client answers 5 out of 10, an appropriate follow-up question could be, why are you at 5 and not 0? This is an appropriate follow-up question because the answer to this prompts the client to give a reason for change. Asking instead, why are you 5 and not 10, is not a motivational way of doing things, because the answer to this question encourages the client to provide reasons against change. Did you get the difference there, right? Now you have to express empathy. This involves understanding the person's feelings and perspectives without judging, criticizing, or blaming. Counselor simply accepts the person's ambivalence about change as a normal part of human experience, whereby reluctance to give up the problem behavior is to be expected. Then you have developing discrepancy. Change is motivated by the size of the discrepancy between where a person is and where they want to be. The bigger the discrepancy, the stronger the motivation is for change. Often clients who ask to change their use of drugs and alcohol experience a discrepancy between their current behavior and how they see themselves in the future. And this approach often utilizes what is often referred to as the Columbo approach, where the counselor plays detective, investigating a mystery where the clues don't add up, and therefore they engage the client in the process to help solve the mystery. And this process encourages the client to recognize reasons for change. A number of strategies can be useful as this stage. One of those is known as a future projection, exploring how the drug use and alcohol use interferes with the client's future goals. For example, do you think you would be able to walk your daughter down the aisle if you continue to smoke 2 packs a day? She is 15 years old now. That would be future projection. Then there's a looking back, exploring the strengths in the client's life prior to the onset of the substance abuse and dependency. For example, you once told me how you used to run 10 kilometers every day before you started using. You must have been very fit and healthy. Yeah? And then there's exploring extremes, loosening the client's attachment to their substance abuse dependency by exploring their worst fears. For example, what is the worst thing that could happen to you if you keep using the way you have been? And then respectfully provide information on the negative consequences of the substance abuse and dependence, such as, for example, have you thought about giving up your regular drinking? Drinking that much is really putting your liver at risk, isn't it? Then you challenge the client's statements. For example, you mentioned that you have concerns about your physical health, yet you continue to drink excessively every day. I'm not sure how these two go together. Then you externalize the substance abuse dependence. This is a process of separating the abuse dependence from the client and can be done through talking to or writing them letters directly to the drug or alcoholic behavior. For example, therapist, if you could talk to the alcohol, what would you say? And the client, what would the client say? Well, you ruined my life. My wife left me, and I can't even see my children. What happens more often than not, isn't it? Woman takes off with the kids, and that's it. Husband has such a hard time, or can't even see the kids. Now you are attacking my health. What more do you want to take from me? I've had a gut full of you. Just get out of my life and don't come back. And then you have what is known as rolling with resistance. There are 4 types of resistance. There's the arguing. The person contests the accuracy, expertise, or integrity of the counselor. And there's the interrupting. The person interrupts the counselor in a defensive manner. And then there's denying. The person expresses an unwillingness to recognize problems or to cooperate and accept responsibility. And finally, there's ignoring. The person shows signs of ignoring or not following what the counselor is saying. So, in motivational interviewing, arguments are considered counterproductive because defending breeds of defensiveness. The best strategy is to respond with non-resistance or roll with resistance by acknowledging the client's perception. For example, a therapist would say, have you thought about giving up smoking as you know it is unhealthy, particularly for your blood pressure? Client, yes, I've tried, though it's very difficult, and to be honest, I enjoy it. Therapist, but isn't there a lot of other things that you enjoy too? If you gave up smoking, then you could take up something else that you enjoy instead. Yes, I'm aware of the health risks, but it's not as easy as it sounds. So you've got to roll with the resistance. And then another way of doing it is supporting self-efficacy. We could talk a lot about that as well. And there's a family therapy. Sometimes you've got to involve the whole family in the whole thing. And then there is what is known as CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And that is, which is you aim to help substance dependence people abstain from using by applying the same learning processes that develop the substance dependency initially. So in treating substance dependency, the goal of cognitive behavior therapy is to teach the person to do basically three things. To recognize situations in which they are most likely to use the substance, to avoid the circumstances wherever practical and possible, and thirdly, to use more effective ways of coping with the range of various problems and behaviors in which may lead to their substance use abuse in the first place. So while this approach is valuable in the treatment of most addictions, it has proven to be most effective in the treatment of behavioral addictions, for example, gambling. And because this process is based on, briefly, four things: to identify clients' irrational thinking, secondly, to challenge the irrational thinking identified, thirdly, to identify core beliefs, and fourthly, to challenge the core beliefs identified. Cognitive behavioral approaches teach clients the skills to evaluate their own thought patterns and core beliefs. In the process, they can move from point A to point B. And there are several examples here. So this is the end of my presentation. But if you are interested in going through some of those examples of identifying the client's irrational thinking and core beliefs and identifying it and then challenging them, we could spend a few minutes doing that if you're interested. Or we can close here. What's your good pleasure?
Well, while you were talking about, the general topic of addiction and things, I was thinking about a group of friends that come here on a Friday evening as part of a Narcotics Anonymous group.
Oh, okay.
And they try and help and support each other in getting over their particular addictions.
Uh-huh.
And it's also quite interesting how, one addiction can lead to another one.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oldest gentleman that I hadn't seen before who was here last night, and he was talking to the young lady in charge, and who seems to be in charge at the moment. He said, what was your problem?
Yeah.
She said, well, started with alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
and then moved on to cannabis,
Okay.
and moved on to crack cocaine.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So what steps of progression or steps downhill until obviously try and get themselves with support of each other and things.
Yeah,
Working back upwards again.
that's right.
But, it's fairly obvious that some of them have quite a good week and others have quite a poor week, where it seems to be 3 steps backwards and 1 step forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for sharing that. And so my question, I'm looking for an answer to my question. Do you want us to run through this last few minutes of how this is done and to identify the client's irrational thinking? And if you do, then you will have something to, I will need you to participate in that. I will need a client and a counselor. And I got all the materials here. All you have to do is to read it, and the client will, the counselor will ask the question, the client will then just answer. And then you will see how we do, how this is dealt with. Do you want to do that, or do you want us to just conclude here?
No, you won't say something, right?
No, we don't have to. I'll speak up.
So we conclude here.
Yes. I'm just looking at their facial expressions.
Okay. Well, we'll conclude here. No worries. Okay, we'll go to. We're Christians. Wait a minute. It's not moving.
It's not working.
Okay. So we've talked about that already. So just a couple of Bible verses to conclude on. Heal me, O Lord, and I shall be healed. Save me, and I shall be saved, for you are my praise. And I thought there was another one. Yeah, there's another one here. Oops. Too quickly. Are you changing it from there? Okay. Right, this is the last text. Come unto me all who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I'm humble and gentle at heart, and you'll find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light. So this is very reassuring to know that as Christians we've got this kind of strength and help to be able to overcome whatever we need to in our own lives and help others as well. Okay. Any concluding remarks, comments before? Oh, by the way, I need my
So where does
forward back.
this the spiritual role fit into the addictive behavior? Where Christ, we believe that Christ can help anybody, just like the text is saying. Jesus is calling us to come to Him.
Yes, sure.
In the world of psychology, where does that fit in? Or it doesn't?
It does not.
Well,
terms of the healing process of the individual.
Right, you see, lots of things in psychology, counseling, are similar to one you will find in scriptures. And there's lots of overlap there. But obviously they don't believe in God. It's a humanistic kind of approach, and God doesn't figure it out. But we have a dimension, we work in the dimension of the Holy Spirit, which is much more powerful than any of those approaches. And therefore we combine the two. For instance, when they say we talk about unconditional love, this is what we believe as well as Christians: empathy, understanding, being non-judgmental, and so on and so forth, and listening to the other person, and letting the other person know that they can change. That's what God is telling us as well. Except that they will look within the person themselves to find this change, whereas we are saying, God is the one who's giving you all you need in order for us to be able to do that. So it is within you, but it's not like self-manufactured. It comes from God Himself. So that's where we kind of depart from mainstream counseling and psychology and all the rest of it. Yeah.
There are some facilities that do mix the two. One that my dad goes to every 3 years. It's the Salvation Army. You familiar with Salvation Army?
Yes.
They have the same program, the same addiction program, and so they share with them with the understanding that it's not you that can change. It's God that can help you to change. And that change only comes through when you accept Christ as your personal Lord and Savior that will give you strength to change. They understand, the addicts understand that, it's a demon that you're battling, as opposed to the secular world where they just tell you that you have an issue, you can overcome it. But they do have programs back home in America that do mix the two, psychology and, faith together.
Yeah, the North American division has a department there where they deal with that. They got all the materials, and And they've got books and everything, to help people who are in the recovery process. And so we, as Christians, we believe in the power of the Holy Spirit to change whatever situation you are in. It can be changed. At the same time, I think we also find lots of help in terms of skills that you can use and things, very practical things, such as faulty thinking that people have, which is in a way an impediment to recovery. And when those thought patterns, thought processes are looked at and changed, then other things change as well in your life. Just read the book of Ministry of Healing, for instance. Yeah, the book Education and so forth. Ellen White talks a lot about the relationship between the mind and the body, and how the more you think positively, the healthier you become. I'm just started to read a book last night before, written by, have you heard of Dean Ornish, perhaps? And he's an authority in the States, a medical doctor, who's helped loads of people with their cardiovascular problems. And he's been able to help them reverse this kind of situations. Now he's also written another book on love and intimacy, and how the power of love and intimacy, the power that it has to actually promote health, physical health, physiological health. So along the same line, as he's a Christian, by the way, it's along the same line as Ellen White is saying. And she even said in Ministry of Healing that 9/10 of the diseases we suffer from originate in the mind. So this is why we need to be able to sort this out, how we think, in order for us to be able to facilitate the healing process and the recovery process. Healing in every aspect of the word, even in terms of relationships, for that matter. Too often, for instance, we're very simple, like assuming what people are saying when they actually were saying something else, and then getting all worked up about that, not double-checking, is that really what you said? That in itself is a way to disturb our inner peace. And then when our inner peace is affected, our health also becomes affected. We are stressed, and then all these hormones rushes through our body, and then creating weaknesses in our body, so to speak. Yeah. Anyway, I think I've spoken enough for today. So I'll let the elder now to conclude with our closing prayer. Richard.